on. But now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Charlie McConalogue, to deliver the keynote address. Minister.
Thank you very much, Damien, and good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you all, ladies and gentlemen, representatives from the EU Commission, representatives from the enforcement authorities of various member states throughout the EU, members of diplomatic corps from EU embassies to Ireland, and members of the media, and indeed everyone both here and tuning in outside of here, and indeed in different parts of the world as well. I'm really delighted to be here with you this morning for this very timely seminar, which is organised by the Unfair Trading Practices Enforcement Authority. And I particularly welcome the presence of so many suppliers who are entitled to the protections afforded by the Unfair Trading Practices regulations. Equally, I'm heartened by the presence here today of significant number of representatives of retail and food wholesale sector and representatives from the other largest buyers of agri-food produce from our primary producers, along with officials from all relevant representative organisations. And I want to thank you, Damien, for emceeing the event here this morning. I want to thank Noel Collins and Aidan Kelly for their work in relation to, and indeed their team, in establishing the office, and Sinead McPhillips and Angela Robinson in my department as well. Also thank Bernie and Coyne Research for the very thorough research they've carried out on behalf of the Unfair Trading Practices Authority, and also indeed thank and acknowledge Christine Tackon as well for her contribution and advice in relation to the experience that we've seen across the water and how that can inform us. But most particularly of all, thank all of you for your engagement and support for the initiative that we have undertaken. Thank the farming representative organisations who are here, leaderships who are here this morning, as well as see the president of the IFA. I see Eddie here from the ICSA, and I'm being blinded here by the light in terms of who else I'm missing. But it's a really important initiative for the agri-food sector, and it requires all of us to work together in terms of its delivery. And at the outset, it's only right to acknowledge everyone who's been involved across the agri-food supply chain, from our farm families and our fishers, who are the bedrock very much of everything that is great in our sector, to those who are working in food processing, logistics, retail, marketing and distribution. Each of these are dependent on each other and rely very much on each other to make a living and to succeed. It's important that everyone in the chain respects each other and acknowledges the role of each other too. Events of the last few years have shown how our food supply chain can be impacted by events outside of our control, and while COVID and Brexit and now the illegal invasion of Ukraine have tested every aspect of our supply chains, it is heartening to see that despite all these challenges, our shelves were kept stocked, our tables were full of safe food, and the wheels of a 14 billion food export sector kept turning. And this has been down to your efforts, and I thank you all sincerely for that. It's a fantastic achievement, and one that should be rightly acknowledged, from inside the farm gate, from the work that farmers were doing, to the work that processors were doing, to work that the retailers were doing, and all of those who are adding value and delivering on that produce in between. It was a tremendous service that you provided to our people, and indeed to our customers right across the world at a really important and crucial time in the midst of those challenges that we've faced in the last couple of years. And as both Minister for our largest and most important sector, and having grown up indeed myself on a farm in Donegal, I'm acutely aware of the importance of ensuring that there is fairness in the agricultural and food supply chain for farmers, fishers and other food suppliers. A viable and resilient agri-food sector, in particular for primary producers, is a key priority for me and for this government. Just 1 year ago, as Noel outlined, I signed the statutory instrument transposing the EU Unfair Trading Practices Directive on unfair trading practices and business-to-business relationships in the agricultural and food supply chain into Irish law. The regulations which transpose the prohibited practices set out in the EU UTP directive and established the enforcement authority in my department on an interim basis were a significant milestone in progressing towards a more level playing field for our agricultural producers. I was determined to ensure that from the outset, the enforcement authority would be equipped with all the necessary statutory powers to investigate complaints, carry out investigations on its own initiative, and initiate legal proceedings for any breaches of the unfair trading practices regulations. Notwithstanding these significant powers, I was similarly pleased and fully endorsed the regulatory approach that Noel outlined in his earlier presentation that the Enforcement Authority have taken to date in terms of developing a culture of compliance with the regulations through targeted engagement with the largest entities in agricultural and the food products supply chain. One of the key principles of the unfair trading practice regulations is to protect farmers and other suppliers of agricultural and food products against stronger buyers who need our protection. The effective enforcement of these regulations helps to provide that protection. It is important to note that enforcement comes in many guises and not just through investigations which end in the courts. As borne out by the new findings of the survey, and as referenced by Noel and Bernie, there is a significant lack of awareness of the obligations imposed and the protections offered by the UTP regulations. Therefore, these promotion and guidance efforts are a soft but important enforcement function, assisting many buyers with necessary information and clarification as well on their obligations under the UTP regulations. I welcome the publication today by the Enforcement Authority of its enforcement policy document, which will inform buyers of agricultural and food produce how UTP law is enforced. The enforcement policy also provides assurance to suppliers of agricultural and food produce and the public that non-compliance with UTP law will be dealt with effectively and appropriately. I also want to highlight the publication of a 6-point checklist, which Noel referenced, that is a simple, I think, but hugely valuable resource for all businesses that purchase agricultural and food products to help ensure that they take all the necessary measures to ensure compliance with the UTP regulations. And both of these documents, I think, are now available on the Enforcement Authority's website as a tool and as Noel referenced. You'll also be aware that by now, since last week, all supply agreements, both oral and written, must now be in compliance with the UTP regulations. Any supplier who considers that they are being subjected to an unfair trading practice covered by the regulation should contact the Enforcement Authority immediately. Let me be clear and let me be quite direct in terms of these remarks, which I'm directing now at suppliers who are listening. The survey findings on why you wouldn't be inclined to make a complaint are, to me, one of the most striking, and indeed, Damien picked up on it just as a final point before my address, and Bernie and Noel responded to. I acknowledge that we have a significant job ahead of us in gaining your trust and providing assurance to you that the Enforcement Authority will do all in its power to end these unfair practices. I want to assure everyone, and all here and all of those online, that complaints about unfair trading practices can be made to the Enforcement Authority in absolute confidence, and they will respect any request that you make for confidentiality. These are not just my words, they're also enshrined in the regulations. The Enforcement Authority will ensure, using each and every power available to them, that any threat or act of retaliation by a buyer arising from a supplier exercising their legal right to make a complaint will result in the strongest possible sanctions against that buyer. To the buyer reps in the audience, I understand that there are concerns and a level of apprehension that the established customs and practices of Irish food grocery buying could be seriously altered as a result of the enforcement approach being adopted by the authority. Again, I need to be very clear. The Enforcement Authority is not trying to rewrite or interfere with good commercial practices and relationships. They are simply tasked with eliminating the unfair from UTPs, and in doing so, the Enforcement Authority has my full support and backing. And I think it's important to note that across the food supply chain, there is a real understanding, and as there needs to be, of the interdependence of it. And there is, in the vast majority of instances, a strong level of respect. But it's really important that that is uniform and that is respected everywhere, and particularly that those who are more vulnerable have the protections. And that really is what the rationale behind this office is about, ensuring that that is consistent and ensuring it is applied and ensuring that that support is there to ensure across the board that there is fair and fair engagement and respect between buyers and suppliers, and that anyone who tries to take a different approach, that there is a regulatory environment which will step in and be available to actually stamp that out. I'm very pleased that a meeting between representatives as well of all member states, UTP enforcement authorities, has now been arranged for mid-June, and I thank the EU Commission for organising this very worthwhile initiative. The Irish Enforcement Authority teams look forward very much to this engagement and will take a full and active part in these exchanges, and I've asked Noel and his team to provide a report to me on the outcome of this initial meeting. Before talking about my plans for the new Office for Fairness and Transparency in the Agri-Food supply chain, I want to speak more generally about the survey that we've just heard about and the Enforcement Authority's plan for the remainder of 2022. Firstly, I thank all the farmer, fishers and businesses that took part and took the time to participate in the survey, and I promise that your feedback has been heard and will be acted upon. I welcome the survey findings as they provide a baseline level of awareness and information on several very important issues that has never been captured before. Some of the findings are very stark, and as with any market research findings, it's what we do with that information that will show the real value of conducting such a comprehensive survey. I listened carefully to Noel's latter presentation about what the Enforcement Authority's plans are for the remainder of 2022, and I fully endorse those ambitions and goals. The survey findings lay bare key priority actions to ensure protection for our suppliers. Without our suppliers, we simply do not have a sector, and our suppliers must be protected. Today's event is called Ensuring Fair Trading in the Agri-Food Supply Chain, and it's very apt in its title. The importance of limiting unfair trading practices from the food supply chain is as relevant today as it's ever been, and I'm calling on the Enforcement Authority to leave no stone unturned in their efforts to ensure fairness in the supply chain and protect farmers and other weak suppliers of agricultural and food products from the actions of stronger buyers. You'll all be aware that the Enforcement Authority was established on an interim basis pending the finalisation of the primary legislation to set up the new Office for Fairness and Transparency in the food supply chain. Huge progress has been made to bring this office into existence, and I was delighted that the general scheme of a bill which will give effect to the programme for government commitment to establish this office was approved by Cabinet recently. You can rest assured that every effort is being made to finalise the drafting process at the earliest possible date to allow the necessary legislative considerations of the bill to begin. This new office will bring greater transparency all along the agriculture and food supply chain. It will do this by performing price and market analysis and reporting function, providing commissioning and publishing reports on price and market information on all sectors in the agri-food supply chain. It will engage with retailers, processors, wholesalers, farmers, fishers and others on matters affecting fairness and transparency in the supply chain. The office will also, as the state's designated unfair trading practices authority, continue the work currently being undertaken by Noel and his team, and will ensure that buyers in the agri-food supply chain do not implement unfair trading practices in business-to-business relationships with their suppliers. The office will be an advocate for farmers, fishers and other small food businesses in the agricultural and food supply chain to help them improve their position and to bring greater transparency and fairness along that supply chain. The office will be led by a CEO and a team of staff to carry out its very important functions, and it will report to a board. And I've made it clear that at least two of those members of that board must be from the food production sector. I want real life, those who get dirt under their fingernails, experience on the board to help guide its important work. In conclusion, I'm excited by the foundation stones that the Enforcement Authority have laid in their work to date, and the work they have now planned in ensuring that that fair trading in the agri-food supply chain will be applied. Equally, I'm looking forward to seeing us progressing and building on this work through the establishment of the Office for Fairness and Transparency in the agri-food supply chain later this year. And I want to thank all of you for attending here today, and look forward to engaging the debate earlier on. And just in summary, emphasise once again the tremendous asset and resource that we have in our agri-food sector nationally. It's our largest sector of the economy. It's our largest sector of exports. It's our largest domestic employer. And it's driven very much by the importance of relationships between those who are producing within the farm gate and those who add value right through that to it ends up in Irish food plates, or indeed to it ends up in food plates in homes or restaurants right across the world. But it's essential that there's fairness in it. It's essential that we as a government work to ensure that there's enforcement in place where that doesn't happen, and to ensure that standards are applied and that the culture is right throughout it. And that's what will ensure that we continue to be a really healthy and vibrant sector and grow into the future and grow in a way that respects everyone throughout that supply chain and that is fair to everyone and respects the fact for a fair income right throughout the chain too. So thank you very much for taking the time to come here this morning for the really good turnout. Thank you to all of those who've engaged online. Thank you to all of those who've contributed so far in the development of this office and the office that we'll be establishing over the course of this year. And I look forward to continuing that work and making sure that we have a really successful and effective initiative to the benefit of all in our great sector.
Okay. Minister, thank you very much.